Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, we've been talking over the last couple of weeks about Dan Kennedy's book, Renegade Millionaire. Now there's a quote in that book that says, strategies without principles tend to dissolve into time or collapse under pressure.
Yeah.
I'm about to run 2 strategy boot camps for Grow CFO.
That's boot camps to anybody who doesn't understand Geordie.
Yeah, boot camps, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The idea is that we're going to take a group of CFOs and take them through a strategy process across the course of a week in 5 2-hour workshops.
Okay.
We're also offering this up to companies who want us to take their whole top team through, rather than a group of CFOs from various companies. This is something that we're planning as well to bespoke, Graham, to any organization that wants to go through the process. But we've got in there a 6-step methodology that we're going to go through across the 5 working sessions in the bootcamp. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that, the principles that we've been talking about from Dan's Renegade Millionaire book really align with this process. And I think if you're doing business with the affluent and you want to apply Dan's principles, well, I think let's talk through this 6-step process and just understand how you would go about putting your strategy together to do business with the affluent.
Yeah.
And how Dan's principles tie in.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a really good plan. And you've kindly supplied me with a diagram which sort of highlights these steps. What's interesting about the way in which the diagram looks, and the diagram is going to be shown in the show notes, so you'll be able to reference it there. But just for those people listening and not being able to see the diagram, you have, as you've said, 6 steps, but the first 3 come under what you've called design, and then the next 2 under build, then the final one is implement. So I guess what we should do, Kevin, is start at the start in this design area. Why have you called it design, just out of interest?
Okay. It's called design because it's working out what it is you're going to do.
Right.
Okay? You want to get to the end of design with a very firm idea of what you're going to stop doing, what you're going to start doing, and what you're going to continue to do. Okay. And you should have looked at some options around what you do, and you should have decided on a preferred option. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
At the end of design, you know what you're going to do. You haven't got into the how you're going to do it, which is the build phase.
I see. Okay. So it's very much deciding where you want to get to. So, all right. Well, you start number 1. What's number 1 then, Kevin?
Number 1 is start with why.
Okay.
And there are a few things going to why. It's really, you're starting with why, and the answer that I want to get out of start with why is where do you want to get to? And I think it lines very definitely back directly to Dan Kennedy's idea of the big idea.
Yeah, right. Okay.
What is your big idea?
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit more than just the big idea in here. Okay. I look at it in terms of aspirations to start off with. If we were having this conversation in 3 years' time, where would you want to be personally, professionally, and so on? Okay. What are your aspirations for 3 years' time?
Yeah.
That's the start point. You've got a business. You want to grow it by 50%. You may even want to double it in 3 years. We had Felix Berardi on the show a few weeks back, and Felix was talking about how you grow a business so you could double it in 3 years. And a lot of the principles that Felix talked about on that particular episode are reflected in this particular methodology.
Yeah.
And Felix as well talked on a lot on that podcast about values. Yeah?
Yeah.
Having some values, making sure your values were shared through your team. Felix talked about A players and C players. The A players all share the same set of values. The C players probably don't, and you probably do not want the C players on the bus going forward. So Start with Why is about aspirations and values and being clear what they are.
So the way that you would go about doing that is what you would get your board or the people who make decisions within your company together, and you would then just ask yourself, why do we want to get to where we want to get to? What is it's the why that you're interested in at that point?
Why? Yes.
And if you had to put
why in terms as well, Graham, of why do you want to serve this particular customer? Why do you want to serve this particular community? Where are you trying to take that community to? What do you want to do? What is the why behind your existence?
Okay. Well, I guess there's all kinds of answers to that. Per business, and maybe several within the same business, because you might have different businesses that you operate, and so and within the business you might have different segments that are in effect run as separate businesses. So this idea of a why is that you're basically saying you're trying to understand the core reason that you want to get to where you want to get to. But you've said 3 years, but presumably this could be 5 years, 10 years.
Yes. You could make it 5 years, you could make it 10 years. I just feel that 5 and 10 years are too far into the distance.
So you're not talking about something that's the next 100 days then?
Well, wait a minute. We haven't got to build and execute yet, Graham.
Okay, fine. Okay. Right. So basically what you're saying is this is the high level. I want to get this business from A to B over the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm going to start by saying, why do I want to do that? Why? Yes. So you're answering that why question.
Think about it in another way here, Graham. You're getting in your car, you're going on a journey, you know where you want to get to. So you're keying that destination into your sat nav.
Yeah.
And when I talk about values as well, I'm thinking, well, hang on, I can just key that into my sat nav, but I can ask the sat nav to take me on the fastest route possible, or I can ask the sat nav to use certain types of roads. I can ask it to take me via certain places. Okay. So that's where there's a destination, but there's also, and this is how I want to get to that destination.
Right. Okay. As opposed to, however I'm going to get there, I'm going to get there. I don't really mind the route.
Well, think to another of Dan's principles: accurate thinking. Okay. No, we're going to come into more of that in the next step. Where are you now? Yeah. Accurate thinking. You need to think very carefully. Why do I want to get there?
Okay.
And Dan's very strong on the big idea.
Yeah. So, okay. So you have a big idea. This is what you want. This is one of the things that you're considering here. That's almost feeding your why. That's and effectively what you're saying is that you've got all the aspirations and I guess up to a point the why feeds the values as well. That basically informs, if you like, almost how you're going to do what you're going to do.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay. So the next step then is what?
Next step is, where are you now?
Okay. Right.
And essentially what we want to get to is a point of, we're starting from a place and we're trying to get to a place. You can do steps 1 and 2 of this process in either order. You can do step 2 before step 1 if you want to. But the thing is that the output from the second step has to be a good idea of what needs to change. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there are some great tools that we use in the bootcamp. And tools, actually, Graham, we've covered some of these in previous podcast episodes. You might recall a long time ago, we did an episode on SWOT analysis, and we did an episode on PESTLE analysis.
That seems to have been an awful long time ago, so I can barely remember it.
They were very early episodes of the podcast. But you're taking 3 or 4 views of your business here. You want to look at your immediate business. You want to look at the wider economy and the horizon coming up. And you want to look at your marketplace.
Yeah.
Okay. SWOT is about looking at your business. And you're saying, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities? What are my threats?
Right.
And that's going to start giving me an idea of, well, there are some opportunities that I can identify quite easily, and I've got some strengths. Can I combine my strengths with the opportunities? Mm-hmm. There are some threats there as well. Now, if threats align to some of my weaknesses, I've got a problem. I've got to do something about it. Okay, so having gone through the SWOT analysis, clustered the main thing together in each of the 4 areas, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, you can start to get a view of where your own business is. Now, opportunities and threats, you might want to look at the wider economy. Okay, and that's where PESTLE comes in. PESTLE is a quick way of just analyzing what's going on. And the letters stand for some things. And I bet you can't remember what they are, Graham.
You'll have to remind me, Kevin.
P is political. E is economic. S is social. T is technological. L is legal. And E is environmental. Okay. So as you're looking at the world going forward, you'd be asking yourself, what's happening politically? What's happening economically? What's happening socially? What's happening technologically? What's happening legally? What's happening environmentally? And how those things play to you will vary according to what industry you're in, what you do. And you would want to be picking up in there on, say, legal, for instance. Is there any new legislation coming along that's going to affect me? Do I have to do things about this?
Yeah.
Environmental is also a big one. So much is changing with a green agenda.
Yeah, it is, and you know, these are forces that you're taking into account. But I mean, if you're a fairly small business, Kevin, the fact that today, when we're recording this podcast, the Prime Minister of the UK has resigned, and you know, under huge pressure from colleagues, economically, we've got high inflation, the highest for getting on 40 years, but reasonable growth. Socially, there's a certain amount of unrest, but it is, you know, effectively, generally speaking, socially, you know, we're in a reasonable place. Not everybody agrees with where we are, but we're not in a horrible place. Technologically, you've kind of got lots of things going on there that are likely to change. You know, there's an awful lot of conversation at the moment about cryptocurrency, and will that become and will Bitcoin and those sorts of innovations, will they become, if you like, the currency of tomorrow? And there are some countries whose currency is worthless, and so, you know, the cryptocurrency comes in and provides some measure of value. But where the currency isn't worthless, in, you know, the UK and Europe, for instance, and America, then much less of a reason to think of it. And you know, you've got some very, very different views about Bitcoin and so forth. Technologically, you've got the Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett's view that says avoid at all costs, and you know, you've got other people who say, look, you know, there are people who are saying that kind of thing about the internet when it came out. Legally, you're right, we've got things like, in my field, GDPR, which impacts on data, etc., and environmentally, as you kind of indicated, the sort of Green New Deal in America, the move from fossil fuels to net zero carbon in, you know, 2030, etc. All impacting the way in which we potentially are going to live our lives. Now, my personal view of net zero is it's very, very important. I don't particularly care for those people who get in the way of others just to make a point. I think that you can make a point in lots of different ways, but I think they've got the wrong end of the stick. I think all they're trying to do is bring attention to themselves. So environmentally, yes, there is likely going to be a change, and we are going to seek out new ways of generating energy. Because the one thing that every country needs, Kevin, and every country needs three things: it needs food, it needs, effectively a supply of water, it needs energy.
Well, Graham, do you remember we did a podcast a while ago, and we talked about the United Nations global goals? Now, if we actually flip back into stage one of this methodology, start with why. One of the things I do in that process is say to anybody that's taking part in the bootcamp is, okay, if you were choosing one or two of these United Nations global goals that were really true to you, which ones would you be going and hanging your hat on? Because that's all part of establishing your why. And it really does link through again into the pestle and what's going on at the moment.
Well, it does, but it depends on if I was to put this pestle analysis together, and I have done, and I did do my MBA, and I have studied this sort of stuff, but and done case studies and actually put it into practice in corporate roles. But I wouldn't have put it into practice with my company. It seems a little bit remote. I'm not saying I shouldn't do it, but I think it's too almost remote from a small business. But I would not disagree with you here, Graham. Remember that if I'm taking a CFO through this bootcamp, well, you've got a business that's big enough to have a C-suite, big enough to have a leadership team, big enough to have people working for them. I don't think you necessarily need to go and do a pestle in a degree of detail when you are a single trader, when you're just two or three people together. You've probably got a very good awareness of what's coming along in your field. But if you've got some sort of fresh out of university guy who's basically left of center, probably far left of center, doing that for you, you're going to get a wholly different sort of pestle than the guy who has a different mindset. Somebody who might be, I don't know, a bit older, and has seen a few things, and actually can see maybe not everything is as black and white as is being painted. So it's very
is that you would never do this as an individual. You would want to do this as a team.
Yeah. Okay.
So you wouldn't want to have that sort of bias. And the point here is to get an understanding of what's going on and a feeling of how it might impact you. But think about a business that is growing quickly. You want to grow at a huge rate. Now, are you going to continue doing all your business in the geographical markets you're in at the moment? Chances are, no, you're not. You're going to be looking to expand into overseas markets. Now, you mentioned as we went along things that are going on in the United States, for example, and are different things going in the UK. I'd say one of the first things you should be doing if you're building a strategy that involves any sort of internationalization is that you do a pestle analysis of the geographical area you're going into. If you're thinking about opening an office in, let's say, Dubai, for example, what is going on in that economy? If you're thinking about a manufacturing location that's somewhere outside of the UK as well, what's going on in that economy? What have you got to be aware of, particularly legally, around the operations there? You need to understand what's going on socially.
Okay. All right. Okay. And you've talked about market analysis, and presumably, have you got a definition for that, or is it just simply
one of the things that I would do with market analysis, Graham, is I'd do something called Porter's 5 forces.
Right. Okay.
Porter's five forces just allows you to look at your own market.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you sitting at the moment versus competitors?
Mm.
Is this highly competitive? Is it not highly competitive? And you're saying here is, okay, from that point of view, then if what are my chances from a competitor's point of view of being able to grow, of being able to make a good profit? Well, how's that restricting me?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the same. Another force that Porter would look at is new entrants. What's the likelihoods of new entrants coming along into the market and taking things away? Suppliers you'd look at as well. What about supplier pressures in the market? Are suppliers going to make this difficult for you?
Yeah.
Okay. And the other very interesting one, Graham, is substitutes.
Yeah.
If a few years ago you were in a market that was putting together that was all about cameras and photography, now what we've seen there is a huge effect of an iPhone coming along and being the major substitute.
Absolutely.
Product. It's come in from left field.
Yeah.
You're in a cameras market, suddenly it's being taken over by a mobile phone market.
Yeah.
So
I have to say, I was talking to a new client yesterday, Kevin, and we were talking about doing some video work, and nobody was really thinking beyond the iPhone 13 or iPhone 12 because it has very, very high levels of sophistication in terms of the image capture, and you think, and as long as the audio is married through various routes, you've got the potential of a very, very high quality and high enough quality for the purposes that's required. So it is the photography market and the video market have changed.
And Greg, think about this in terms of our affluent audience. For the first time in a long time, I went on holiday a few weeks ago and didn't take with me a camera. I didn't take my DSLR with me. I mean, mine, actually, I've thought about replacing it on several occasions. And cameras, that's something you can spend a fortune on. Models go into many thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
You've now got to think about, well, hang on a minute, something has come in there and disrupted that marketplace considerably.
Well, yeah, it's okay. So where are you now? You might be facing substitutes. You might be facing all kind of political pressures, etc. There might be some dozy buggers out there who think that we're going to go, because Boris Johnson has gone, that we're going to go and join the sclerotic EU again. Hopefully not. But
there's another bunch of people like Nigel Farage who'll be thinking, perhaps we're now going to implement Brexit properly. So
I hope so. I hope so. But
all that you would be doing there would be observing and probably making yourself aware of the possibilities. You're certainly not going to try and predict the future too much. Dan talks about accurate thinking, and that's what Swart Pestle and market analysis are all about. They're about his concept of accurate thinking,
which factors in some uncomfortable truths as well as some you're not just taking on your own opinion, but basically some truth about the market.
Porter's five forces, and it's a each one of these tools are just so simple, Graham. But five forces, you suddenly say, hang on a minute, I've got pressure from suppliers, I've got loads of competitors, I've got some people trying to enter this market. Oh, and there's this substitute product. All of those are saying limited growth, limited profit. Should I be in here? Looking elsewhere, and you go away and you look at another market that you could potentially enter rather than the one you're in at the moment, or maybe a one that you're operating in a little bit as your second market. Should I be growing this instead of the main market? And you do the same analysis.
Well, I have to say, Kevin, just I don't want to divert you too much, but I mean that's exactly where I am in my main business. That I'm shall we say moving crab-like towards a slightly different way of deploying similar sorts of resources. So I am thinking about the use of different media. I am thinking about how I go about delivering the result that my clients really want. And so therefore it means I have to take on new challenges and to do things in slightly different ways that actually hopefully will have a better outcome. And well, the signs are reasonably good. So basically, it's one of those things that I'll be I'll be moving forward with over the next few years. But you've done number 2 to death. So where are we now?
Well, we've actually strayed into number 3 a little bit, Graham.
Okay.
Because you've done that analysis. Your first thing that you should be doing, number 3, is looking at your current revenue. Where's it coming from? Which products or services is it coming from? Which customers is it coming from? Okay. We've talked about this sort of thing loads. And we know that our top 20% of customers will probably give us 80% of the profitability. Okay. If they don't, well, there's probably something wrong. Our bottom 20%, we probably want to walk away from. Okay. We've also looked at the market, and we've realized that certain markets might be limited in growth that we can go forward with. Other markets might give us more possibility. So we're starting to put some options together. So we should be looking at our revenue streams as they are at the moment. What should we be getting rid of? What should we be trying to grow? What market are we in? What market should we be in? And we should be getting to a simple decision of stop, start, and continue.
You talk about the things that are in examine the alternative approaches, and you're going to, before long, we're going to stray into number 4. But alternative approaches is another way of actually saying strategies.
Yes.
But you see, are you putting strategy into the design, or are you,
strategy is the whole lot, Graham.
No, I kind of get that, but the point is examine the alternative approaches. You have lots of different options to do. Like I said, with my business, I'm changing how I go about getting a result. Now that means different strategies. It means almost everything. What I do and how I present myself, how I sell my services, and so forth. So in this particular case, what you're saying is you can stop what you're doing. Or you can start doing new things, or you can continue, and maybe within that you've kind of got a bit of both. So
that's it. That, to me, in a nutshell, a strategy will be, you've got to a position where you can clearly articulate what you're going to stop doing, what you're going to start doing, what you're going to continue with. And I would hope there's something in all 3 of those.
Right. So that's design then, Kevin. So that's the whole first 3 things that you would take out the 6 steps. So the next 2 steps are under this category called build. Why do you use the word build?
Well, you decided what you're going to stop, start, and continue. But what you haven't done at the moment is put any sort of plan together in order to do that.
Right.
Okay. So we've talked about where do you want to get to in 3 years' time, Graham?
Yeah.
Okay. So we need a route map to get there. Okay. And build is no more than you put the route map together that gets you from point A to point B.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, this route map thing I always visualize it as a sort of like, if you get a sheet of A4 and you kind of put A at one side and B at the other side, and you take or maybe Z at the other side, and it takes you through the different letters, and those letters are your route. So maybe the first thing you've got to do is hire a new well, it wouldn't be a CFO necessarily, but it might be hire a new marketing director, and then or a new sales director, or go or choose a different a different channel to market into.
That's exactly it. That is exactly what we're talking about here. But I'm going to refer us back again to the podcast we did with Felix Maradi. Now, Felix didn't start at the where am I now, what am I going to do next? He started at the other side of the piece of paper.
Yeah.
Okay? And actually what I'd do here is I'd have that piece of A4. Well, actually, I'd probably like a bigger piece of paper. I'd probably, if I was doing this in person with a team going through this exercise, it'd be a big piece of flip chart paper, a big piece of brown paper, blue tack to the wall.
Yeah.
And I'd start off in the top right-hand corner, and I'd write down where do we want to get to? Okay. And that would be something like, I want to grow this business by 100%. At the end of 3 years, I want to sell the business for a large sum of money. I want to have a particular profit margin, which is going to directly impact my value. And I want to have an award for customer service, and I want to be recognized as a great employer. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And all of those things that we've just talked about there should be dropping out of your why that we started off with. They should be dropping out of the where do I want to get to piece, the very first part of the box. We've looked at the SWOT and the PESTLE and market analysis, which has probably shaped our view a bit. So we've got to that stage that we can articulate those. Now, I'd then say, rather than working forward from where we are now, I'd say, fine, what has to happen in year 3 for us to get there? What does year 3 have to look like? Right? And where you said, oh, I've got to hire a marketing director. Well, my year 3 would say, I've got to have a leadership team that can run the business post-exit.
Yeah, no. I kind of get that, but you know, and I'm not saying Felix was wrong in any way at all. I think he was very much right. But if you took a piece of A4 and you put a line down the middle of it, and you had going forward on the top bit and going backward on the other bit, then on the bottom bit, then you'd have almost like two views that hopefully will kind of match and challenge each other.
Actually, Graham, that's more or less exactly what we do in practice. You know? I think we've got to start off with okay, here's where we want to get to. So that implies this is going to happen in year 3. So what do we need to do in year 2 to make that happen in year 1?
Yeah.
What are the foundation in year 3? What are the foundations then we've got to build in year 1?
Yeah, okay. That's completely logical.
Yeah. Okay.
It also helps you with prioritization as well. Yes. So you might think, no, I don't need that marketing director. Just need the sales director. Just need the sales.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that's the right answer. I'm just saying basically that you know, by the time you got somebody in place and by the time they've started to make an impact and all the rest of that, it's just, I just think there's that, you know, I've never really seen that done though, Kevin. I've never really seen a strategy laid out back to front to back.
Yeah, and it's something, actually, if you pick Felix's book up, there's a lot about it. Felix uses something in that book that I've used in practice with clients before. I remember working with a couple of coal-fired power stations down country.
Yeah.
And there was the goal with the power stations was we're going to be the last station standing. You know? Recognizing, going back to the PESTLE piece, environmentally coal is out for power generation and so on. But all of these power stations are going to close. Our ambition is we're going to be the last one. And actually, one of those one of the pair is now closed. The second one, Graham, is still open, and actually has had an extension in its license to operate because of the current crisis going on in Ukraine and the lack of oil. So it is going to continue to produce electricity from coal for just a little bit longer than was planned.
Yeah, well, but isn't the daftness of that strategy coming home to
yeah. And the thing was, they actually said, hang on a minute, if we're going to be the last station standing, well, what are all of these environmental things that we've got to be seen to be complying with? Okay, because if we don't change in line with the law, we're not going to be out there and doing things. Or we've got to have the right team of people in place to continue going forward. And there was all sorts of things went on. That particular thing that we use, it's called a sunray diagram, because effectively you take your piece of A4, you've put your objectives in the top right-hand corner, and then you sort of separate the page out with lines coming from top right down to bottom left, and you sort of split the page out that way into quadrants. You have some circles which show year 3, year 2, and year 1. So in section 1, you'd probably have, what are you doing people-wise? What are you doing customer-wise? What are you doing product-wise? And in the 4th segment, you'd have, what am I doing internal process-wise? And then you'd be able to say, I'm doing, in each of those 4, you'd have those split out between year 1, year 2, and year 3 things.
I don't think the human mind is usually in a position to be able to sort of coordinate these really very well. You know, because as soon as you start talking about people, you that, what is it Samuel Beckett called them? Bloody ignorant apes. The
Yeah.
thing is, they behave in peculiar ways, and the fact is, put in a 3-year plan, isn't that the thing that said that, you know, it's a good way of making God laugh when you come up with a plan for people, because at the end of the day, it's very difficult to do that. So, you know, these plans, you know, I just wonder whether or not that sometimes we can overthink it.
Your objective is, say, I want to be on the Sunday Times 100 best employers list. Okay, then, so what does that mean this place has got to look like in year 3? And what are the criteria for being on that list? Therefore,
I suppose culturally you could sort of say that you want to follow this, but, you know, and I don't know, you could even go down the route of, you know, I don't know, saying that you want more women on the board, etc., or more ethnic minorities on
Indeed.
the board, etc.
They're all very
that's important to you, but ultimately, all of that is a nonsense if you don't actually make the end goal.
Yes.
If it's a subset of your achievement, a building block, if you like, of your achievement, and it's a necessary, 100% necessary. And isn't that the point that most of these softer, it's probably wrong to call it a softer priority, aren't really that necessary, Kevin? I don't know. I'm finding it difficult, more difficult now as a smaller business person. Did my MBA, worked in really big companies, saw how crass some of their planning was, really, because it was way over engineered, big documents that nobody read. Whereas
I totally agree, Graham.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that we want to avoid coming out of this process. I do not want a 40-page business plan for anybody.
No.
The plan that we're talking about putting together, the strategy roadmap, we're talking about one piece of paper.
I think you want the piece of paper to be about a mile wide. I get that, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you had a you know, an A3 sheet, and on that A3 sheet you had a really clear interlocking corroborative, easy for me to say, a set of priorities that supported each other to get the company to the next level, that then, you know, got it to the next level. That makes sense to me. And in Felix's terms, that would be the sort of disaggregation of where you've got to the point before, and then, you know, to the point before that.
Then we're coming down to the next 100 days.
Right. Okay. I get you.
This is where it gets practical. Now, in the boot camps, I'm using a piece of software with the team all the way through, called Lucidity. Now, I'm using Lucidity to document the strategy. Okay. Now that piece of A4 that we've just been talking about is an exercise to dump things onto something that gives you some idea of the right order and the right priority, and start saying, if year 3's got to look like this, well, this is what we've got to do in year 2, this is what we've got to do in year 1. And the reason that I'm talking about a big piece of paper on the wall is that you can start sticking post-it notes on, and you can move those post-it notes around, you can change the plan, and you can use it as a working document. Okay. But we're probably going to go into Lucidity. Now, Lucidity is a fantastic tool because it allows you to document your SWOT analysis. It allows you to document your PESTLE. It allows you to document 5 forces. And there are about 20 other strategy tools in there that you can optionally use. If you're building a marketing strategy, for instance, there are even templates in there to put a customer persona together, things like that. So very, very powerful collection of tools. But its real thing is that it allows you to build a plan in a tree structure. So you put your objectives down. Okay, you can look at the metrics that you might have to achieve to get there, and you can put behind that, or what are key milestones to get to that objective. Now, if I'm looking at things that have got to happen this year, I would very definitely be saying, right, so what is our priority for the next 90 days?
Right.
Okay, 90, 100 days, next quarter, for sake of argument. Okay, and you say you've probably pulled a strategy team together. So you've got somebody looking after the people strategy. You've got somebody looking after the marketing strategy. You've got somebody looking after internal process improvement and operations and so on. You've got somebody looking after the customer strategy. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got these sub strategies, and each one you should be saying, well, given the big route map that I've put together, what is the most important thing for each of these people to be concentrating in the next 100 days?
Okay.
And it comes down to that old principle again, Graham. You work on one thing that can move this forward the most for the next 100 days. But because you've got 4 or 5 people on your team, you can give each of them the one thing.
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
I mean, this lucidity thing, it's one of those things that we should probably invite somebody in to talk about it, because I think it's quite an interesting idea. The software itself, I mean, how much is it likely to cost?
Well, the software, it depends which version you're looking at, but say as a rough figure, this is going to be £1,000 to £1,500, depending what version you want.
Right.
Given what this is going to manage and how it's going to enable you to do things and communicate things, if you're planning to grow to double the size of your business, well, £1,000 on the right tool to do it is next to nothing, Graham.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get where you're going with that. So, yes. So that's Lucidity, and we'll put a link to them on the show notes. So you've basically you're in the build, or have you moved into implement? Because if is Lucidity,
we've moved into we're talking build because we've put the plan together, and you kind of move through this. You flip back and forwards a bit between build and implement, Graham, because your plan, you'll have you'll in build phase, you'll have built the route map, and you'll have dropped it down to what are you going to do in the next 100 days.
Yeah.
But then you will be executing the plan. So you want to communicate clearly. You want to be monitoring. You've given people lots of actions. So you want to be measuring people to make sure that the projects that are being done are on time. So Lucidity again has a great task management function in it. You can do the sorts of things you can do in Trello in Lucidity. It's all in one place, and it links back into your strategic plan. It's a fantastic piece of software.
So it's I'm being cynical here, but so instead of having a document that's on the shelf that nobody looks at, you have a piece of software that is in your computer that nobody looks at.
Except when it pings you emails that said you're on schedule to do these tasks this week. Have you done it?
So you get annoyed by some little email bug that tells you to do something you forgot you had to do.
The thing is, Graham, it's very easy. And again, we're coming back to some of Dan's principles, that it is very easy to work in your business. It's very easy to be busy all day doing stuff.
That's a fair point.
The actions that take you to the next level have got to be done. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't write those actions down, progress against them, they're not going to be achieved.
I think you one of the things you were absolutely right about was the fact that Renegade Millionaires will not think like other people. So how many Renegade Millionaires will use the Lucidity? I don't know, maybe quite a few, because it might help them crystallize their thoughts in such a way that they can get these entrepreneurial thoughts that other people don't have, but then they can actually break it down into things that need to get done to bring those thoughts to life. So I guess they have
around again, Graham, that we're talking about doing business with the affluent. We're talking about doing business with people that think the way Dan Kennedy does, and the top 5 or the top 20% in the money pyramid. So what we're saying here is, if you're going to do business with those people, deliberately focus. Well, you've got to have a clear strategy of how you're going to do it. And you've got to do some particular things to get you there. And again, it comes back to Dan's idea of, well, 2 ideas: accurate thinking and reject limiting definitions. And it's very easy to stay with the day-to-day that keeps you doing the same things to the same people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is about breaking out of that and doing different things it could be different things to the same people, or it could be the same things to new people, or it could be different things to different people.
I think when it comes to the affluent, I think one of the things that is advised of all companies, marketing and working with the affluent, it is that you really got to find and build unique relationships with them. There's not as many.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the purpose of a unique relationship is that you understand their needs and wants better than anyone else, and therefore you're in a great position of wanting to fulfill them, but also being asked to fulfill them. So I'm working with some clients at the moment who basically, one particular client who's really at the beginning of their journey, and their comment, which was really well received, but they said, we can't do this without you. So there's already at this early stage a very symbiotic relationship, but it's because I kind of understand what they want, and I can actually go and present ideas to them that reshape. I mean, one of them was to do with, that logo you got, forget that, do this one. It's it doesn't speak to what you're doing, but also doesn't bring in the type of people that you want to have. So it's little, that's a little example, but the point is you put yourself in a position of being a very trusted advisor, their man. I'm not being sexist, I hope, but just their person who gets things done.
Absolutely, their person, Graham. But what we haven't talked about is box 5 in the build phase. Set targets and budgets.
No, right.
If we come back to start, stop, and continue.
Yeah.
Now, you've just mentioned there that this is all about relationships with the right people, getting to know what they want. And so on. So let's suppose we've got the scenario that says, actually, the market that we're in is going nowhere. We've got to be in this adjacent market here. We've got to move this way. Okay. Now, we've got to get to know the affluent customers in that market, that new market that we want to go into, extremely well. Okay. Now, the biggest thing that we've got to do here is make sure that everything that ends up in the start box gets funded properly. Okay. Now, if your job as a salesman is to go out and talk to those new customers, but you've also got to go talk to all the old customers, how are you going to do it? Right?
Well, you're not.
So, do you need a new salesman to go talk to those new customers? A salesman that might know them already. Okay?
Yeah.
Equally, if you're that salesman talking to all those old customers, the stop box is incredibly important, Graham. It's all right saying we're going to stop doing this, this, and this on a piece of paper, but I actually really strongly believe in everything you've said stop to. You've got to have an exercise of taking the money out of the budget. Okay. Now, you go and talk to the sales director who'll say, oh, you want to start all of this stuff. Well, I need 2 new salespeople to do all that stuff. And I say, well, hang on. No, you don't, because I want you to stop doing all of this stuff. Okay. And you will find the budget for your 2 new salespeople by stopping. Effectively, there might be 2 new people, but it might mean getting rid of 2 old people. No, you've got to be quite ruthless in there. And that's a very simple example. But in a big organization, I'd start using zero-based budgeting. And I'd say, fine, if we're going to stop dealing with these particular products, well, what support costs do these products incur? What development costs do they incur? What customer service costs? And now, if you find that you've got a product that isn't really going anywhere and is taking up half the time of your support desk, ask the product, now, should I be going back and reviewing the budget going to the support desk? Yes.
Kennedy does have a book about ruthless application of pricing and costs and so forth. And I think one of the things about that is that, with salespeople, as being a sales manager and being a salesperson for a long time in various corporates, I know that what you would do with any kind of new change, you would try and layer it on to what you've already got. And the right approach to make sure that your focus is compensation, is incentives, etc., would be geared to that new thing, and that would make existing people, or the right existing people, to change their behavior. But there'll be some that can't make the journey. So basically, the ruthlessness comes in letting them go, because basically they're going to be very unhappy in the role going forward, and you're doing them a favor. And so therefore, being ruthless means that sometimes you just have to replace people with others who don't have the same, I don't know, scruples is the wrong word, but basically the same mindset that says they're going to continue to fail, and they're not going to be able to relate to people in the affluent market. So I think it's like the guy who constantly says hello, mate. I might be old and fugly about all this, but I always recoil when somebody calls me mate. I'm not your mate.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say you don't have to say sir, but in America, they have, and some, they have, there's a politeness that we don't have over here. It's, I guess it's almost like a faux friendship thing, but the truth of it is sometimes it comes across in a really disturbing way. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about when you're going to be dealing with the affluent, because frankly, don't call them mate.
Quite.
Anyway, that's another thought.
That's a dropping down a nice little rabbit hole there, Graham. But you can see in this, we've got a 6-stage process that starts with why, asks you where you are now. Then out of that, you start to realize what needs to change. You examine the alternative approaches, and you get to a point that you say, here's what I've got to stop, here's what I've got to start, and here's what I've got to continue. Now, that, as I said, is the crux of your strategy. It's coming out at the end of the design phase. So now we're saying start, stop, continue, going into, well, hang on a minute, I need this 3-year plan. What's going to happen when and who does what? But I also need to say, in order to start things, I need to fund them properly. And I actually believe that one of the reasons that a lot of strategies fail is people fail to fund what they're going to start to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And B, fail to stop what they say they're going to do. In practice, if I get into a zero-based budgeting exercise, which is what you'd be doing here, if you're in an organization that's got 100 people in it, there'll be budget holders. Budget holders will have their own pet projects. You say, here's a zero-based budget. Here's the stuff that we're going to make sure we've got money to fund. We're going to fund this new stuff. Here's the stuff that we're not going to fund. Therefore, these lines will not be in your budget. They will say straight away, yes, but I'm an exception to that. Everybody does it. And it's the hardest thing about this whole exercise is saying no to most of the people that tell you they're the exception to the rule.
I have to say that probably the best person to manage that within a company is either the managing director or is because the managing director is focused on getting from A to B, but also potentially the CFO, because effectively the chief finance officer, whoever that person is, has to be rigid. And I think that's your point about allocating the right budget and not layering on budget and not being taken for a ride, etc. The end goal, is far more important. And what you're saying is fund the right behaviors, fund the right processes, and you've got a decent chance of getting to the goal at the end. Absolutely.
And, you're going to get into the 6th block on this, take action. You're going to execute the plan. You're going to execute it for the first 100 days. You're going to come back and then you're going to say, what's the plan for the next 100 days? But stuff changes, Graham. So you've got to have flexibility all the way through this. And that actually is why I hate the 40-page document, because the 40-page document is only relevant the day you write it.
Well, I'm not even sure it is there because it takes you longer than a day to write it.
And nobody reads it either.
Well, maybe one zealot somewhere. Step
6 and take action is about communicating clearly. It's understanding that nobody's going to read a 40-page document. What do you talk about? What do you tell them? How do you message this? What's the culture? How do you take people on a journey? So actually, when we're in a boot camp, we spend quite a lot of time actually looking at that implement stage, because I've done a survey, actually, Graham, surveyed a lot of CFOs, got about 100 responses back from the survey, which is great. There are three, most CFOs say that they want to be involved more in the strategic process than they are at the moment.
Yeah.
And there are three reasons come out. A, lack of time. B is, I don't know if I've got the skills to do this. And C is, I'm not sure if we're going to have people on board to actually do what we want them to do. I'm not sure we can take people on the journey. So one of the reasons that we're doing these boot camps is, number one, well, look, we can go through this. It's a simple process. Strategy, everybody feels, is complicated. And that's probably because there's just a lot of moving parts. But now, as we've gone through this, you've seen that none of the moving parts in themselves are actually complex.
No.
It's just doing them in a process and making sure you don't get carried away with any one in particular. And you keep it lightweight and agile. And as you say, you don't want the 40-page plan. Okay.
I mean, Kennedy himself said that the most valuable businesses are process businesses,
yes,
not product businesses. And I guess, and the more rigid you stick to those processes, the more likely you are to make most money from it.
Yeah. I know we've talked about start and stop. The continuous stuff, Graham, as well. I would be saying as part of this, well, fine, if we're going to continue with these things, these are products and customers we're going to grow.
Yeah.
These are products and customers we want to make more profit out of. Therefore, rather than our focus here being on start and stop, it's got to be on improvement. Okay. Well, I'd be looking to have an element of process improvement in the strategy. Maybe in some organizations, some lean improvement going on around those things you're going to continue.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, all you're doing is it's a typical consultancy thing of layering on a little bit more money for you to go and advise a bit more on. But
no, Graham, I'm not. I really am not.
Yeah,
I would make an observation here that says, if you go around the average organization, ask individual managers to save cost, they'll all tell you that they can't save anything.
Right.
You go and you put them in a workshop and says, right, I'm going to talk through here the 7 wastes of lean.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, think about your organization. Now, get up there and write on the whiteboard some examples against each of those 7 headings.
And well, the examples will inevitably
whiteboard.
Yeah, well, and none of them will relate to your part of the business. They'll relate to other people's. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm being perhaps a little bit overly cynical, but I think it comes down to strong management. I guess it comes down to having a rigidity of a plan that basically gets you from A to B. And I think that's really where it is. It is going to be about a process, and the process that you've laid out here is a really good thinking process that would actually get you into a place that said, I'm going to move to this particular market, serve these particular people in this particular way, and this is how I'm going to get there. So it's been a really valuable session, Kevin.
You say as well, Graham, this is a way of getting client to spend lots and lots more money on consultants. Well, actually, to me it's the opposite. The reason that I'm passionate about this stuff is because consultancies do charge you a huge amount of money for this, but you should be able to do it yourself.
Yeah,
I'm actually passionate here about enabling the CFO to lead his team through the process, or lead her team through the process.
Yeah. Okay. That's very honourable, and I think that's what you have to do. I think the like you said, nothing's particularly stretching mentally in where I think the really clever stuff is where you can actually visualize and explain how you get from one to the next to the next to the next. So you're actually putting it in English in a way that you could explain it to a partner or a friend down the pub that doesn't understand what you're doing. But if you can explain your strategy using the sorts of the planning methodologies that you've got, what you wouldn't talk about is pestle, but what you might talk about is the story of the world around you. It wouldn't be a word salad like the Vice President of the United States gets into on every occasion, but it would be something that you would almost use a story about to explain.
I could turn this quite easily into a 20-second elevator pitch of the process, which would be, okay, so we've got to start with why you're in business, what your principles are, and where you actually want to go to, because we're going to think about how we're going to get you there in as fast a way as possible.
Okay.
So we're going to start with thinking about where you are now, thinking about the market around you, thinking about what's profitable, what's not profitable, and in short, what do you need to change? So once you realize there are things you've got to change, we're going to look at the alternatives. We're going to consider what the best way to move forward is. And that will come up with a list of things you've got to stop, start, and continue. Once you've done that, then you've got a clear picture of where you want to be in year 3. So we're going to build a roadmap that's going to work backwards and say, if this is where you want to be in year 3, what do you need to do in year 2 and year 1? And we're going to look again at how you set the targets that are going to show you progress on the journey, how you set up the projects that are going to get you there, and how you fund things properly. Because we've got to look back at that stop and say, how do we take the money out of the organization we're spending on the things we're going to stop? How are you going to properly fund the things you're going to start? And thinking about the things you're going to continue with, how we're going to do those in a bigger, better, and more efficient and more profitable way. And we're going to come up with a plan that moves us forward and gives us the ability to execute, evaluate where we are, replan once every 90 days, and deliver this strategy so that in the course of 3 years, you can double the size of your business. There you are, elevator pitch, Graham.
Oh, yeah, but you didn't tell me that there was 50 floors, Kevin. But no, I
what
get it.
Pat Helmer said this week, the average elevator journey in New York's 118 seconds.
Right, okay.
Well, he did say that elsewhere the average elevator pitch was 20 seconds, so you've got to be pretty brief.
I thought he lived in Chicago, but I mean, that's a hell of a place to live, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
shootings and everything. But anyway, that's been really, really helpful, Kevin, and I think there's a lot of good thinking there. So I guess, if companies want somebody to help them and they like the idea of, it's a simplistic, you say you can do it yourself, but sometimes you do need that person to help guide you through. And, whether or not you go into a company and actually help them move from one place to another, particularly if they're looking at marketing to the affluent, is that the sort of thing that you'd be prepared to take on new clients for?
Oh, absolutely. And we're running the boot camps coming up to get a group of CFOs together so that they can go through this process, take it back into their own company, having put half the strategy together and refine it when they get back. But the alternative way of doing this is that I would much prefer to get the 3 or 4 influential people from the company together. And go through this process, and you wouldn't do it in 5 workshops over a week. You'd bespoke it to exactly what the company wanted. You'd use the time frame that they wanted. You may well run more than 5 workshops. You may do certain things in more detail.
So there you've heard it here first. Kevin's available for hire to bring this to you. So if you want to speak to Kevin about that, then I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes and you can pick up with him directly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Graham.
So, Kevin, that was a really helpful run through of some strategy that helps you market to and do business with the affluent in context of business strategy. So thank you for that, for doing the legwork on that. Today, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.